We're talking to the future. Is that what you're saying?
It was.
right,
It
we're
wasn't even a
recording.
Thursday. It was a Monday. I don't know what I was doing. So
We're recording.
We're live. Did you say, Maddie?
thank you. Okay, this is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board on June 19th, 2025, Juneteenth. And I am Janet Hurley, board chair, and I'm going to ask board members to introduce themselves clockwise as I see you on my screen. Kirsten.
Sorry, Kirsten Sultan, board member present.
Alex.
Alex Weinhagen, board member. Hello, everyone.
Sarah.
Sarah Hod, board member.
And Brooke.
Brooke Dingeldine, board member, present.
Thank you. Any changes to the agenda? Kirsten.
So just to mention, I don't think it's an agenda change, but we may need more than 10 minutes on wood products. So just kind of a mention.
Okay. Okay. Is that all for agenda? Okay. Let's ask if there are any public comments for any non-agenda items at this point. Annette? Annette, you're muted if you're talking.
Did we unmute the people so they can talk?
Yeah, we did. I also made her a presenter, so she should. I don't know. Maybe she could try and leave and come back.
Sorry, Annette, maybe you can try and leave and come back. Oh, there you are. Can you, okay, she's gonna try leaving and come back. We can come back to public comment on non-agenda items and go to operations, budget, and legislative updates. Pete?
Yeah, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Relatively slim on this end, but I'll give you a quick overview on the legislative matters. I think you've got general awareness of most of these, but as you know, the legislative session has ended. We've got the budget and the two positions for district coordinators, roving positions. We've got funding for digital infrastructure that'll help with application updates as well as the tier mapping. That's Act 27. We've got the open meeting law, which exempts site visits from open meeting requirements. So district commissions will not be required to haul around hearing equipment in those site visits. Or the board for that matter. And there's also a requirement that there's a little more specificity to our agenda items that's required, and we've been doing that kind of as a matter of course already. But there is one other change that affects the board is we've got to have a 2/3 vote for ending executive session. There was always a 2/3 vote to get into executive session. Now there's one to get out of executive session. So we'll begin implementing that practice under what is Act 51. I don't think there's a act number for S-127. And that bill did not, does not directly impact Act 250, except for a couple of brief things. There is a explicit prohibition on discrimination based on citizenship and immigration status in land use decisions and permitting and housing. So that will be something that we'll just have to ensure that we're living up to. And then there is a piece about changing the appeals deadline. So we've been kind of eyeing towards this all along, but it was originally January 15th, and that's been moved up to November 15th. And then also including in our appeals study, the idea of what resources we would need as a board if appeals would be transferred to the board needs to be included in that legislative study as well. So those are kind of the two direct things under 127. There's a couple of other pieces that may have more indirect implications for the board's work in Act 250. Generally, incentivizing and creating funding mechanisms for manufactured homes and mechanisms to increase public infrastructure capacity. So some of those projects may go through Act 250 eventually, and so there may be some uptick in some of those applications given these funding mechanisms. So again, those are kind of indirect impacts to Act 250 through S127, the housing bill. So I will leave it there unless there's any questions on any of those pieces. And Alex.
Well, just the snarky observation that if, when we go into executive session later in this meeting, we may never come out if we can't get a 2/3 vote to come out. So just for those in the audience who are wondering why we haven't returned at the end of the meeting, it's possible that we just can't ever come out.
So
I thought about that too.
I was going to ask, so does that mean that we record a motion in our minutes to exit executive session? Record a motion
No,
and a
that
vote
does not
on
need to
that
be in the
motion?
minutes.
Okay.
That does not need to be in the minutes, yeah.
So we just have to be sure that at least 2/3 of us want to leave executive session. Okay. Brooke.
What is 2/3 of a 5-member board?
Yeah. I was like, what's 2/3 with this much of me? Right.
3.3333. So is it four
Four.
people? Do we round up?
Yeah, probably. So nearly unanimous. Okay.
No one ever seems to want to stay in executive sessions, so I have a feeling it might not be a problem from a practical perspective.
Right. I just think it's interesting to require it, but not have some sort of documentation of it. Okay. So let's go back to opportunity for public comments and see if Annette has regained any audio capability.
It looks like she's still having issues. I see
Oh,
that she's
darn.
in here
Oh, there's two of you,
twice.
Annette.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not sure what the
Maybe-
dual.
Maybe Annette wants to call in using the phone number option.
Do you want to try that, Annette?
Did what I just do change anything?
Oh,
I'm just confused also how there's two.
Couldn't we turn the chat on so that Annette could type in her comment at the very least? I think we can trust everyone who's in this meeting at the moment, public and otherwise.
The other option would be the call-in option for Annette. That might work. And there's a raise hand feature in that too. Suggestion.
I did just try to make her a presenter, which means she would have the same capabilities as all of us, so it doesn't seem like that. Has that enabled your microphone at all, Annette? No, doesn't look like it.
okay,
Okay,
Annette, do you want to try to call in
I think
on
she
a-
is.
phone line? Okay. All right. is there any other public comment on non-agenda items today? That looks like a landline. That should work.
Can you try now, Annette? I just updated another setting.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, okay.
Hold on, I gotta get rid of one of me.
Worked too well.
All right.
Get rid of the one that has the crossed out microphone.
Well, they both worked. So whatever the problem
Sounds
was
good.
on your end. I
Okay.
tried 2 different browsers. Nothing has changed on my computer. I enabled everything. I tried a browser I never used before, and I said yes, access to microphone and camera. So whatever you just did is important to do. My comment that I wanted to make to you and why I persisted is that I just walked my dog and went to get the mail and realized that it's a state and federal holiday.
Yep.
And I wonder why you're meeting today.
It's not a state holiday, apparently.
Well, it's somebody told me 2 days ago, a town clerk, that it is a state holiday. So in any case, there's celebrations going on. And while I tend to be the only member of the public who participates, I just wanted to point out to you that it may be construed as being disrespectful. So
Yes.
you
And-
can do whatever you want with that, but
No.
I feel like it's important to say.
We discussed this, Annette, because it is not considered a holiday for state staff. And we are state staff, all of us and our staffers. And so it's also my birthday. And I did say, yeah, we could take it off because it's Juneteenth, but not because it's my birthday. And then when it was explained that it's not a holiday for state workers, we decided to keep it.
Well, happy birthday. And this is a particularly sensitive holiday.
Yeah,
and under the current climate,
especially now.
it's very important to be respectful. I happened to watch the news today and saw a lot of coverage about all the celebrations that are taking place. So let's at least acknowledge that today is an important holiday for people to be able to recognize.
Absolutely. Thank you
And
so
other
much
than
for
that, I
bringing that
thought I
up.
will stay around because it has been a really tough garden year and there's a window right now and I sure could use a holiday.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
good luck to you, and I may stay tuned in, but please make note of whatever you just did on the settings to fix the microphone, because this wastes a lot of time.
And Janet,
Yeah,
just before she goes, I wanted to just clarify. It is a state holiday and recognized by the state. However, the executive branch, of which we are a part, is not recognized by. So there are state staff that do recognize it. It's just
Oh.
because they're a function of the executive branch, which does not. So that's just something absolutely worth noting, as this is definitely is a state and federally observed holiday. I just want to make that distinction.
okay. Is it Brooke? Yeah, Brooke.
I am concerned about this continuing problem of not being able to unmute people. And I know this was discussed about the logistics of this, and I do not think that we should be setting our meetings with an automatic mute. We do not have issues or problems in terms of too many people wanting to talk for too long, or our public is very respectful and engaging with us. And I would like to see the default setting to be people are not automatically muted. And I don't think we should have, some global muting thing. We can ask people to mute themselves if they accidentally forget to, but this, Renee Carpenter has never been able to speak at a public meeting. She has tried and isn't able to, and I don't know what all the computer issues are, but this seems like an impediment that is completely unnecessary, and it seems to waste a lot of time.
Though we're not necessarily sure that it's the automatic mute that's causing this. I just want to point that out, but go ahead, Annette.
Well, since Brooke has raised it, I will offer my perspective because I attended a lot of these types of public meetings. I spent hours with Climate Council meetings, PUC. The Public Utility Commission has a policy that they say at the beginning of their hearings, we will not mute any of you. And so when there are people that forget to mute, someone may weigh in and say, hey, so-and-so is doing it. But it generally has not been a problem. I live in a town where our select board will only let us speak at the beginning of a meeting. They won't let us speak during the meeting at all. And they won't allow video. So we have to listen and figure out who's talking. When visuals are shown, we can't see them. And being treated like bad children is really, I find that I react by getting angry. So when I have to get involved in whose problem is it about muting or unmuting, and also in the meetings that we have done where you all have had to unmute people, it just takes up time. And I don't think any of us want to waste time on something like that. So from my experience with other meetings, and everybody else mostly has a chat, at the Climate Council, you are not supposed to comment as a member of the public unless you are, unless it's public comment time, and people are respectful of that for the most part, unless they're new and they don't know. But I do try and represent the interests of the larger public when I make comments like this to you. And I think there's, especially because there's so few people participating, but if there are people that are participating, cutting out that extra step, I think will be beneficial to the efficiency of the meetings. Thank you.
Kirsten.
I'll just quickly mention a couple things. I support cutting out the extra step, noting that we have the mute all feature that can be deployed. And the other thing is just quickly to note, in terms of Juneteenth, it's the corrections, according to HR, according to their website, it's corrections and state police that have it as an observed holiday, but the rest of the state workforce, it appears it's not a holiday. So it's not exempt versus non-exempt. Like exempt, it's not observed, but additionally, all of the other non-management and supervisory units are also not observing it as a holiday. So I just wanted to clarify that. But thank you for the comment, Annette. Understand.
Annette, do you have your hand up again, or is it just left over? Okay. So we, I don't think we have anything else under operations budget. Do we, Pete?
No, sorry, I couldn't get my cursor in the right place here.
And then I think I asked for other public comments and we didn't have any. So let's move on to a review of the draft communications plan. And I have it up. Do you want me to share screen?
Do you want
Yes,
to do
please.
studies and reports first, or?
Oh, I'm sorry. See what happens. Okay, hold on. Yep, I see. Yeah, let's do studies and reports. I have nothing new to report. Let's go with Alex.
I also have nothing new to report. Lots of great conversations. I'm not going to burden you with all the specifics. More to report next week.
Okay, Sarah.
Tier 1A, comments due Friday, ACCD asked for extension to Monday. I'm fine with it coming in on Monday instead. I've been telling people that if they need more time, let me know, because I'd rather cast a broad net and get more people. I think another thing that I just wanted to say publicly is there were some questions about what Tier 1A encompasses for exemptions. Tier 1B requires mixed use housing and it's more housing focused. Tier 1A is everything, including commercial, in terms of possible exemptions. We're going to continue having conversations about what that means in terms of municipalities administering, to answer some of the questions that have come in on that. And I think I'll just quickly, as long as I'm here, say that Kirsten and I also talked about very briefly the 1 in 10 acre and getting to work on that. I think it wasn't necessarily a study report, but just an area that we were looking at in terms of the application process. And I think we are going to also talk about the road rule, hopefully beginning of July. Kirsten, feel free to chip in.
I concur.
Brooke.
Fourth appeals study stakeholder meetings on Friday at Vermont State University Randolph campus in the Langevin House again.
Is that on Friday or on Monday?
The same Friday, I meant Monday.
Yeah, Monday. Okay.
Next Monday, the 23rd. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we will be hopefully sending out an agenda later today. And it's the last of the scheduled stakeholder meetings for this phase of the study. And my understanding is after this meeting, we will then have the board consider and discuss the topics that have been identified. And we may in the future go back to the stakeholders with specific issues or ask for input. But right now, this would be the conclusion of our preliminary stakeholder process of gathering the data and information so that we can do some analysis and formation to perhaps go back later and get additional feedback. If that sounds like how the board would like to proceed at this point. We've received a lot of great input and information, and we want to dig a little deeper into some of the proposals and the components of the proposals to really focus on the three biggest issues that need further input. So hopefully we will be successful in really getting that information distilled. And then we will be, after the board convenes and does some work, then we can decide on next steps.
Okay, and then Kirsten, we're gonna do wood products in a few minutes. Do you have anything else you want to discuss? Okay, so thank you. Quick studies and reports. Now, the communications plan. So do you want me to share or oh, Sarah's going to share. Good. Okay, so this is just
size?
What?
An okay size for everyone.
It's okay for me. I don't know. What
Okay.
about everybody else?
Looks good.
Okay. Just briefly, a formatting thing. I'm hoping that the A, B, C, D, E can be indented further, so that it's not in line with the 1, 2, 3.
I tried to use the template that was online. It needs to have, I might take Alex P up on the offer
okay.
in terms of formatting eventually once we get through all this.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's great. Then we don't need to talk about it now.
Any other general issues before I sort of dive into this? So second sort of time through it, and I know there's a lot on everybody's plates. So I'm not expecting that people have gone through it necessarily this week, but I wanted to sort of go through this, see if there are any other additional comments. I'm going to be presenting this at the all staff meeting next week to get staff input. I think Pete was very helpful with showing me all the great things that we have already, and trying to pull in and build from that in terms of legislative. Just, I'll go through this quickly and note some areas I've already gotten some comments. And please feel free to raise your hand, stop me along the way. But I think the first piece on this was getting into internal communications. And I got some feedback that there are lots of shoulds in here, and maybe those should be wills in terms of aspirational. Again, wasn't quite sure how strongly to word some of these things. Janet.
Well, I can wait until you finish. I was just gonna comment on something on page 1. So
Okay. Let's go back to page 1.
Yeah, so and Brooke brought this up last week, or was it last week or this week? I can't remember when. It was Monday. But the International Association for Public Participation Spectrum for Public Participation as a foundation. And I kind of wonder if we couldn't just describe what that spectrum of public participation is instead of referencing the International Association for Public Participation. I think it's used by so many that it's not necessarily proprietary to them. And I think if we just sort of describe and you sort of show it in a matrix later, but I think it would be simpler to just refer to the spectrum in plain language instead of referencing the International Association for Public Participation.
So just adding in.
Do others have thoughts on that?
I agree.
Okay.
I think referencing this international spectrum, I guess is the word, just in general, I would be more comfortable incorporating the specific content that has applicability to our work as opposed to just this generalized kind of, we will follow this international standard that may change, and then we're beholden to what? I mean, I think it's better to incorporate the elements directly into the document.
Okay, Brooke?
Yeah, I don't like referencing something we don't have as part of the content of the actual policy that we're working on, or plan, whatever you want to call it. And I don't want to be premature, but I'm not comfortable with the matrix at all. I think it's very general, and
well, let's get to the matrix later.
Yeah. Okay.
If we're gonna use it, we can describe it here. Okay. Okay, Sarah, go ahead, page 2.
All right, Brooke still has her hand up. Oh, okay. So anything under key audiences, or I'll switch to get back to internal communications.
Yeah, hang on.
Yeah, Brooke.
Yeah, on page 1, you went a little fast for me. At the bottom of page 1, you have, for external audiences, the very bottom line says industry stakeholders.
Yep.
I didn't exactly know what industry that you were talking about. I mean, is that?
Oh, yeah, and I also had, I wonder if we need to take out the parentheses under applicants. You know, what it leaves out is citizens who might be applicants. So I think we don't need to list them, just applicants, and we have general public, and maybe instead of industry, just saying stakeholders, other stakeholders, or something like that.
And to answer the question, it was, for instance, we're engaging with the wood products manufacturers, I think there are some industry stakeholders there. That was what that was meant to be, but.
But there
Kristen,
could be non-industrial stakeholders too, so.
right.
Kirsten,
So what about permittees? Like people who have obtained an Act 250 permit?
maybe it should say applicants and permittees.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we good to move to page 2?
Looks like it.
All right. So I think as I was touching on before, one of the things was about how forceful you want to be with language, and the idea was to, instead of shoulds, have some of these be wills in terms of being more aspirational and direct. I think the other key thing was to clarify with internal communications and guidelines. Yes, this is internal to within state government. However, there are some specific requests like legislative, and perhaps elected officials, which is different, which could be considered a different category. And we do have one on legislative, but I'll clarify that a little bit more to make sure that those, while they're sort of internal to state government, are pointed to that legislative section in terms of demand a more formal way of response rather than internal. It can be a little bit more informal. And we have, go ahead.
Just, I think I mentioned this on Monday, but we have these 3 separate arms in our program with an executive director, a general counsel, and a business director. And they are sort of what we call the leadership team, and that they are also sort of the key contacts between each of their staff and the board, and that it's not necessarily the board chair.
So this should be another category under roles and responsibilities.
I don't know, it's just something to think about. And, you know, what it says here is board chair serves as the key liaison between the board and staff, but I'm not sure that's true. I think it's more the supervisors that are the key liaisons between the board and staff. But I mean, let me ask the leadership team's supervisors whether they feel that to be the case. Pete and Allison.
I mean, I guess for number 2, when you first started talking, I was thinking maybe that's what you meant, like where it says executive director manages day-to-day internal communications. That I think that is generally true. There's a lot of, but there are things in our different areas that we would be the primary contact on legal communications about legal advice. But I guess you could edit that number 2 or make it a separate one, like is being done now.
Maybe executive director, legal counsel, and administrative services director have I don't know, or it's, I don't know that we need to figure it out here, Sarah, but that there is this unique structure that we have that will inform the way that we liaise between different parts of our organization.
Right.
And that the business director term is actually, I mean, the official title is administrative services director. So I think we should use that in our official documents.
I'll come back to that. I'll massage that a bit more.
Okay.
So the concept is not to enumerate all the specific ways that we communicate. I think Pete actually had a great list with a lot of specifics. I think this is just giving loosely, these are the people, these are the tools, and what we try and do with them. And so, the employee engagement piece was worth a little bit more in terms of highlighting that this is an area that we're not only disseminating information out to, but asking for information back. So
and to speak to what you said earlier about the shoulds versus will, and in fact, this is something that the executive director conducts regular meetings. The legal, Allison conducts regular meetings with her staff, and I'm pretty sure that Rachel does too. So this is something that happens. It's policy now, and I would not be opposed to taking the shoulds out.
and
we
instead
go
of
back
putting
up?
in,
So if I may, what is now bullet 4? I think you can just strike the word respectfully. I think that's just kind of like a blanket, characteristic that we would all expect be employed throughout. I don't think it belongs there.
Um,
And the other thing I was going to note is like that
communications
particular
to be
paragraph.
respectful, you're saying, right?
Well, of
Is
course
that-
we're all
is that
gonna,
what you're
like
saying?
it just,
Yeah.
I mean,
So taking it out there, and maybe there can be an overarching,
well, right.
Well,
Item
we have
3
it up at-
captures that anyway.
oh,
right?
you already
Like
have
we've-
it. Right, there you have it.
Exactly.
So
Like, it
yeah,
just
take it out
doesn't-
below.
It's an
Yeah, I would
unnecessary
agree
word
with
in that
that.
location.
Yeah, I would agree.
The other thing is, this particular paragraph pertains to the board members and appears to not pertain to the chair. And it underscores that the board members are to keep the chair and executive director informed on these communication matters. And then when you look at the board chair, I think that part of what should be included in the board chair roles and responsibility is keeping the board also informed, on a sort of case, on a case by case basis. Like the way it's worded, serves as the key liaison between the board and the leadership team. So it's kind of saying it's the liaison between those two entities, if you will, but it's also the chair's role to liaison the board itself, the board. So I just, yeah, exactly. Something like that. Thank you.
Well, I
If
think,
others
no, it
agree.
sounds like what you're saying is that the board chair should be liaisoning between the different board members, not just the executive director. Is that what you're saying?
Right. The way that's worded, it sort of suggests that the liaison that the chair facilitates is between the board and the leadership team, and is not highlighting and underscoring the importance of the chair and serving as the liaison for the board itself, with bringing all the board members together as a board.
Right. So Sarah,
Yeah.
instead of saying executive director there, which is really part of the leadership team, just say, serves as a key liaison between the board and leadership team, as well as all the members of the board, or I don't know, something like that. Is that what you're saying, Kirsten?
Yeah, that is, I liked what I think Sarah was starting to write, like keeps the board apprised. And, coordinates communication, amongst the board itself, like something like that.
So between members of the board and between the board and the leadership team.
Yes. but it's also keeping the board members apprised of matters that are relevant to the board.
Right. Does that
have to-
say it though?
I think so. And I mean, we don't have to get sort of final wording nailed down here now. I think it's awkward to maybe get
Yeah.
there, but I think we all,
Yeah.
like, unless someone disagrees.
No, I agree. We can keep moving. This is, pretty rough draft, and we're just trying to give a little direction for Sarah as she continues, so.
Anything else under
Wait,
internal?
Don't go. Just in terms of, I mean, the board is not going to serve as a liaison between the members of the board. Right?
Board chair.
I mean, the
Is
board
what-
chair, right, but the chair. I don't,
So
I don't
maybe,
see that as a role. I mean, we talk to each
Yeah.
other on the board, right? We don't have to go to Janet to talk to the other board members. Right?
yeah, I don't know. It sounded like Kirsten was suggesting that the chair should keep people
Well,
aware
well,
of
it's like-
what's going on, I guess.
Yeah.
keep
yeah,
the
'cause
board
if you're-
members. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're in charge of something, you need to keep the board informed if you're the one who's collecting that information. And, it may come from a board member, but I don't think that you're intervening between board members. I think you're keeping the board members informed of stuff.
That was
Yeah.
the thrust of what I
Okay.
was. Yeah.
So, serves as key liaison between the board and leadership team and keeps the board apprised of happenings
Matters
Yeah.
relevant to the board. Like,
or to the program, not just the board. Yeah.
I'll do some wordsmithing on that.
Okay.
Anything else under internal?
Can you go back up? So, okay, methods and tools. Does that cover it all? Maybe. Looks like it does.
Brooke?
Yeah, just on the next part, employee engagement. I think taking out should is fine, but I don't think that the statement, the executive director conducts the meetings. I think it should be the executive director will or shall or,
But he does conduct regular staff meetings.
well, yeah, I know, but we're creating a document that says here are the rules or here are the guidelines, and so it
Oh,
should
okay.
say the executive
So you think
director should
The
do this
will
thing.
should be in there.
Yeah, I think
Shall,
shall or will or
Okay. Okay.
I think a will is fine. And then will provide channels.
Hmm.
And all the way down the line, number 3 should or will establish follow-up
Yeah.
procedures. 4 you already got as a will.
What about phone communications? That's not in that list. Voice
Those could-
and text, do we need to discuss that? Do we have a preferred method of communicating between meetings? Should it be email? Or do we need to get into that? Like when's it appropriate to use text versus Teams chat versus email versus a phone call?
Well, that's what the table tries to sort of help with.
Right,
Um,
I was
we-
just saying that there is no phone option in that list under methods and tools. Okay, there you go. do we want to, in employee engagement, is this where we would put something like, that we have an annual meeting or staff meeting under employee and engagement? Oh, well, you say team building activities. Pete, is it? Do you have 2 meetings per year that one is a staff and one it also includes the district commissioners, or?
We've done it in different ways over the years, and depending on budgets, et cetera. But generally, there's an annual meeting in the fall, and then there's usually a spring training, and we've done like a Northern District spring training and then a Southern District spring training, just to be able to get out similar trainings on each for each. But that has been kind of one of the models that we've used that hasn't occurred in that regimented way really recently, except for the annual meeting has been pretty consistent. And yeah, Kirsten, you've been with the program for quite a long time. You might have some thoughts that way too.
Well, and also, might we say employee and commission engagement? Because some of this we engage our commissioners on, and they aren't technically staff.
Yeah, I had a question along those lines. In item 4, what's meant by interdepartmental? Like, it's not clear to me if that's within the Act 250 program or would also encompass external partners. And then I think instead of saying to improve connectedness and morale, I would just say to support connectedness, teamwork and morale, because improve suggests that there's something we need to improve, which there's always things we can do to improve. But I kind of, maybe we're doing so great someday, but interdepartmental, I'm not clear what the word means.
Yeah,
here.
I would.
I think it's not the correct term for, we have, for instance, our legal team, we have our coordinators, we have
Interdivisional?
techs.
I think
We
if
can
you're
just-
talking about, that should be intra, INTRA, intra-departmental, if you're talking about within the LURB, maybe. As opposed to inter, that's like between other.
But it is confusing to use departmental because we don't, we're part of state government, which has departments, but we're not a department and we don't have departments. We have maybe divisions or I don't know.
Just within the organization, maybe, right?
Within
just put internal.
internal. Yeah, okay. But I would include not just employees, Sarah, but commissioners in this section somehow.
Well, maybe it's here. This is specifically to employee engagement. But you're saying
Right, but I think we can extend it to employee and commissioner or commission engagement. And, all but that first one. Well, even the first one, you conduct regular meetings, Pete, with the commission chairs. So,
yeah, I was just gonna add that
regular
comment in too.
meetings instead of saying staff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
good. Thank you, guys. This is getting there.
Oh, what about the employee engagement survey results? Like, should we say the annual HR employee engagement survey results will be gated and annually to determine what adjustments should be put in place?
I don't think we need to get that detailed here.
No?
I think that survey is one tool that we could use. You mean under number 2?
Yeah, the feedback, but then the follow-up. It's just kind of part of employee engagement. It's an important tool, I think.
Yeah, it's a survey.
Just think about it.
So the key thing with and I tried to keep this brief enough and concise enough that people could read it, understand it, and implement, is you could get a lot more detail with all these different aspects. And it's great, and we might want to, but for just starting off with, here are some things. And so, yes, we are going to provide channels and encourage feedback and open dialogue. And I think we can talk about other ways to implement this. So there's having the plan, and then there's how you implement it. And I think, yes, that's part of discussing those results, and coming up with different paths of how to address it is part of it. But I think it falls under number 2. So hopefully we have something like broad enough here that can cover it without being too into the weeds, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to be cognizant of the time, and I do want to try and get to external communications. And so some of the feedback that I got on this is making sure, so we have external communications, and I'm just going to flip through very briefly. I come right back, but we have legislative testimony inquiries. So recognizing that I think external is that broad net, but then we get into, if we have some very specific types of communications with complaints and legislative. So, and I am going to add under legislative that that's also how we handle elected official inquiries too, as being sort of in that same vein.
And Sarah, can I just, since we're on this page, as I recall, you and I looked at the Northwest Regional Planning Commission's communications policy, or their engagement plan, I think. And
Yes.
In that, they explained that the empower category on the spectrum of engagement is not always relevant. And I think that that's very true in our case, because the, state statute doesn't necessarily give to the general public the power to make decisions that we are singularly empowered to make under statute. So I think we need to think more about that spectrum and how it may or may not apply to us, especially the empower category. Because the authority to make decisions on, for instance, a regional plan determination of compliance, we can't give that to the people that show up at the meeting. We have to do that as a board. And so I think if we're going to show this this spectrum, that we may need to be a little more, we may need to provide examples for the board, for the program, as to, when each of these types of engagement is appropriate. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And that was I made a note of the timestamp for the minute, just for the recording, so I can go back, because I think you had some good wording. I also highlighted this because I think I need to make the same change here that I need to at the beginning.
Yeah.
To Brooke's point. So absolutely. And I think that's a key thing. It'll be hard to describe briefly, but I think you just did, in terms of just our consistency and the ability that we have.
Look at the Northwest Regional Communications Plan again, or engagement plan again, because I think it did a good job of it. So It won't be the exact same solution that we have, because I think we will have even less ability to empower.
Yep.
But yeah, Brooke.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake to put this chart in at all, because you can put whatever asterisks that say, oh, it doesn't apply to everything, but people are going to see that. And I
Well,
agree
I
with
think-
in the empower thing. But you have like MOUs, memorandums of understanding, have been executed with state entities, and stakeholders should guide communication and engagement with these parties. What stakeholders are you talking about? What kind of MOU are you talking about? There are MOUs in the litigation context. There are MOUs just with like A&R or whatever. And when you start throwing the laundry list up, you better follow it. And so I think that this is casting too general a net onto trying to create these these charts to follow. And when you do that, you have to follow them, because they become legally required if you enact them. So for example, I agree with the empowerment situation, and I know these are from these theories of how to engage the public, because it's very challenging, and there are times when we need to do that. But just with stakeholder meetings themselves, are they a consensus report? Are they a LURB report? If they're a LURB report and we're asking for input, great, but we don't want to in any way articulate that this decision making is being abdicated. So I'm very wary of these kinds of, oh, let's bring in some model and impose it, because we have so many different things that we do. That's my concern.
Right. And that's what I'm saying, Brooke, is that we need to provide examples and flesh that out more. I think that we are obligated to develop a community engagement plan, and we are obligated to address this spectrum in that community engagement plan. So I think insofar as this communications plan is sort of a precursor to something that we will be developing over the course of a few years here, that will become more like a public engagement plan. I'm not for taking any reference of this out at this point, because even before we develop that community engagement plan that we are obligated to develop and adopt, we are a public body that is responsive to the public. And although I totally agree that we need to be careful about, we can't be putting out expectations that shouldn't be there. But we do need to do more than just inform if we want to be a board that is public facing and responsive. So I think rather than taking this out at this point, that I would like Sarah to take it and sort of flesh it out more, and to make it relevant to where our authorities lie versus versus our obligations to the public, or not versus, but with respect to our obligations with the public, to the public. Kirsten.
I was just going to mention that I think, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Pete can confirm, I haven't looked at them in a while, but I think some of the MOUs have expired and are not technically in effect. And I guess I'm wondering, and sorry if you touched on this, Janet, I'm not really understanding that. Are we envisioning that this will be like a living document or remain in draft form for a while? Are we looking to get this to a finished final version of a communication plan that the board will like review and vote on and adopt? Is that the plan? Because
I think that this is a very first draft. This is a rough draft of something that I think will help us as we work in the next few years to develop a public engagement plan. And I think that at some point, just like we reference the records information management policy, instead of including it in here, we reference it. You know, it could be that once we have a community engagement plan, that there is no reference to this spectrum of engagement.
That's
You know,
absolutely.
that we just reference the separate policy. And but in the interim, you know, I don't think it's a bad idea to give people an indication of what they can expect in terms of our community engagement. And I think we especially need to be careful about that Empower, because we are vested with authority that the public isn't vested with. And so, and as I said, Northwest Regional Planning Commission did a really good job of that. And I think Sarah can go back to that and modify this. And to, I guess, to further answer your question, Kirsten, this is a rough draft. I don't know that I don't think there's any kind of deadline on it, but I think it would be nice to have something. And I think what these would be guidelines rather than a plan. Sarah, what do you think?
So I think I'll just wrap this up because I realize that we're at time. I appreciate
Oh, okay.
everybody's ideas. And so what I'll say in sort of closing and wrapping is absolutely, I think you're spot on. And the idea was this was becoming sort of the kitchen sink, right? Of, oh, we'll address this in the communications plan. And then I think we started to sort out what we need to address in something like this versus the rules of procedure. For instance, our records management plan, that is a 20+ page document to reference. We have MOUs, which is just sort of like, here's a pointer, here's something else that is in place. Just be aware that these things exist out here that we also need to follow. And I do see that Northwest Regional Planning's public participation plan is, I think, like over 20 pages as well. It would be nice to have something really robust that we could just point to these things and have a 5 or 6 page sort of where to go to find these things and how we communicate out. I think the idea is, particularly before this fall, if we can have something just for transparency purposes to say about how we communicate and why. I think we were starting to get some questions about some of our other study that we had, whether it's tier 3 or the appeals, and what we're recording and making available. And I think having some sort of a general philosophy to share with people about how we're going to communicate out will save us headaches in the long run, and will be a good way for people to anticipate what we're going to do and why, and sort of encourage that sort of trust that comes from transparency. So I have some more work to do. I'm looking forward to getting staff input on this as well. I'll come back at some point in time, but yes, this is going to be a slow moving boat, and I look forward to hearing more from you guys on this.
And Kirsten, can we move on, or do you have something that absolutely can't wait?
We can move on.
Okay, so let's take on the wood products. And do you want me to, do you want to share screen this time so that you can? Okay.
I'm happy to do kind of a walkthrough. So since the meeting on Monday, we did receive comments from the FPA. And I guess an initial question is, has everyone had a chance to read through those?
Yeah.
Okay. Sarah and I met and in follow-up to her specific comments at the Monday board meeting, and found time yesterday and Tuesday to work together on some wordsmithing and edits. And also, I think with this latest, what's now draft 4, which I'll share with you momentarily, reflect our sort of preliminary response to the VFPA comments, but I wanted to see what other board discussion might, be relevant to making further edits to the report. So maybe I'll start with, just kind of as a refresher, sharing the FPR comments again, like this was the FPR comments on draft 2. And I know we went over this, but just to kind of reorient some of that input. The first component had to do with this language that we've talked about at length. And they had asked for some specific rewording, which, my interpretation of what the board position is that we're not looking to incorporate wording that might negate or invalidate existing Act 250 obligations or the ability of district commissions to impose conditions needed to satisfy Act 250 criteria. So,
Kirsten?
Oh, go ahead.
So we only have 10 minutes on the agenda.
Okay.
And I think what might make sense is for you to point out the changes that have been made since our Monday meeting, rather than to go back to the FPR comments.
Okay.
And I think, I'll just say that I looked at the new comments, and I think some of them have been answered in terms of, one of them was about basically activating our recommendations instead of having them be passive. And I think we already did that. And they also bring up this same question that FPR that you were just talking about. And I think that we discussed that and decided how we were going to go with it. So I think if you can show us what has changed since Monday, I think that's where we should focus. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the other piece was the automation of the Stony Brook process that we had already discussed. So this is the rewording of the Stony Brook component of the executive summary. And I am coordinating with legal on this, but I'm just showing you the alternate language for this particular item. And I sort of got a preliminary, yeah, looks good, but we'll let you know if there's any further change that's recommended.
Kirsten, can you show what the footnote is for that? Is it just a citation?
Sure. It's just, it looks like, I don't know why we omitted that there.
It might have been accidental.
I think that's
your strike through probably accidentally got the footnote.
It's a reference to the Stony Brook guidance. That's one of the attachments that explains that precedent and how one can, to an extent, how one can request that provision of Act 250 precedent be applied to an application. So that's that change. Is everyone, any questions or?
So this would include availability of the Stony Brook precedent, which can limit applicability of future Act 250 jurisdiction beyond a defined permitted project area subset of the tract, and other existing provisions concerning logging and forestry. I think there's something about that sentence. I think the logging and forestry may be part of the previous sentence, and the Stony Brook should be.
So it's describing what would be included in the fact sheet and supplemental guidance to identify the benefits that are specific to the sector are the soils mitigation ratio, the minor process, and the provisions for hours of operation. And then in addition, availability of Stony Brook and other provisions.
I would separate the logging and forestry from the Stony Brook.
Okay. So you would just make it its own separate.
Yeah, separate sentence or something, or
okay. I'm not gonna try
singular
to kind of
sentence to
wordsmith it right
explain
now, if that's
Stony
okay.
Brook.
'cause
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
feel like it's
Yeah,
too time consuming, but I'm
yeah,
happy to
I
do
agree.
that.
Yeah,
Okay. And then this is where Sarah and I worked together on some rewording in follow-up to Monday's board meeting, making these more definitive recommendations as they pertain to items 9 and 10, which involve pursuing, changes at the legislature. And so it's not just exploring that these actions would occur, it's
we're recommending
saying that
they
the board
do
would
it.
would specifically be recommending that these do occur.
Yeah.
And then there's a sentence here explaining that the board will submit some specific language for, consideration by the legislature. And then this was, Janet, you had asked for that, action by the board.
Yeah.
So I think this is fairly straightforward.
Okay.
We also, for consistency, we sort of pluralized permit specialists, ombudsperson, and then this was some of the wording on the ombudsperson item that Sarah had come up with for web-based tools. This is, again, this is just where this appears in the executive summary. It's not, there's a more detailed description later. So I'm just going to keep scrolling down.
I'm sorry, I have to refill my water bottle. I'll be right back.
Oh, okay, we'll wait.
Sorry.
That's okay. So this was just a little bit of shuffling of some of the words and organization of some of the text. Some minor edits. I think fairly straightforward. Same thing. This was just like a reordering of the paragraphs that had come up during the board's discussion on Monday. And then this sentence was seen as sort of duplicative, so we took it out. Okay, I think then we go all the way down to, sorry, you're getting the visual of the whole thing, but I think we go all the way down to like 8 and 9. But yeah, so this is item 1, which is the fact sheet and supplemental guidance. Sorry, I'm like scrolling all over the place, but I added an item to align with the FPA comments where they found that this particular item could have some helpfulness to prospective applicants, and they wanted this noted specifically in the fact sheet and supplemental guidance. So I went ahead and pulled that content into the information planned for inclusion in the fact sheet and supplemental guidance. So it's just providing notice that the coordinators are available or Act 250 staff are available to assist prospective developers with this kind of pre-application, pre-purchase guidance. Any sound good? I mean, we had the same wording elsewhere in the report. It's just pulling it in here. Okay, and then I think we get down to, so this was the added addition of web-based tools as a component of the permit specialist, ombudsperson, and or web-based tools that we will continue to advocate for. And then Sarah, do you want to explain a little bit more about web-based tools, that opportunity as you are sort of championing it a little bit?
Yeah, I think we wanted to leave it broad enough to recognize that maybe there's a Permit Navigator 2.0 or something like that out there. I think with AI, they're offering also call-in features where somebody that might not be web savvy can call in and use a web bot to answer questions. There's so many different variations. I think we want to just be very broad about it, but to recognize that maybe there is a way to use technology to try and offset the need for many people to be involved, in that you could have like a few key people overseeing a better use of technology, or being that sort of all others are zeroing out to like a real person at some point, but that likely it will be working within the parameters of what we have and augmenting it with people maybe in a better fashion. That's a quick overview.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Nope.
Okay. Then we get down to item 9. So there's been some discussion about whether or not item 9 is or is not within the study scope. And so Sarah and I thought that maybe this could be reworded to recognize that, that this had stated explicitly that it's beyond the study scope, and this is saying, well, it may be. Nonetheless, the board will draft language to put forward specific legislation for this item. Again, providing it doesn't negate existing Act 250 obligations.
Cannot is
Or-
one word, by the way.
What's that?
Cannot is one word.
Ah,
Word is yelling at you to make
Yeah.
it so.
okay. And then similarly, the item 10, log and pulp concentration yards it's a definitive action item. It's not just something that will be, reviewed. I think we underscored that in the executive summary wording for this item as well. So,
Kirsten, wait,
yep,
I just got one quick thing.
sure.
You talk about the advisory opinion that was issued, and you put in Stephanie Kaplan's name sort of out of the blue, and I know who Stephanie Kaplan is, but I don't know that other people do.
Yeah, maybe just say issued in 1991.
Yep.
I mean, love Stephanie, been in touch with her for the appeals stakeholder thing, and we could call her by title or whatever, but
Yeah. Well, and
Cool.
that AO is an exhibit, so people can look it up if there's interest. And then, so it's a definitive action that we will be recommending changes to the definition. And as noted earlier, we'll be submitting language for consideration. I don't think we changed any of these A, B, C, D, E, F, G. These are all the not being recommended by the board. And then we worked on the conclusion with an eye to also some of the feedback from FPR around, is the minor process working? So maybe I'll kind of zoom in on, like, read this first paragraph as it's been modified, and then I'll scroll down.
How about I read it out loud?
Okay, sure.
With implementation of the selected 10 actions to be undertaken by the board and the Agency of Natural Resources, including the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, this report identifies how the Act 250 permitting process can better support WPM and their role in the forest economy. This work, developed in consultation with FPR, was informed by a survey, in-depth Act 250 WPM file review, supplemental meetings and interviews with WPM, and meetings of a stakeholder group. Specific reported challenges and concerns of wood products manufacturers have been identified, discussed, and addressed in the findings of this report. Coordination with ancillary A&R and municipal permitting was identified as a challenge. However, changes to these other permit processes are beyond the board's reach. A review of the minor permit process shows that it is functioning as prescribed and that it may benefit from continued evaluation given the limited time frame of available data. The plan changes to Act 250 rules to facilitate permitting of WPM facilities and drafting of statutory changes for log and pulp concentration yards and logging and forestry will be pursued as a result of this report. Plan changes to Act 250 rules to facilitate permitting of okay. So the 4 rule changes and the 2 statutory recommendations, the 10 actions recommended in this report will better support WPM and their role in the forest economy in accordance with the Act 181 statutory charge. Do we have to have in accordance with the Act 181 statutory charge? Can we just eliminate that phrase?
Sure,
Um,
it's gone.
and the one thing that we didn't summarize there was the fact sheet. Seems like
Well, no,
we
it's just
touched
one
on,
of the 10 actions.
yeah, but it seems like you touched on all the rest. Maybe.
The rules.
That's okay. It's okay.
Oh, okay. I can add it in if what's there covers everything else.
Okay.
Like-
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, Brooke, you.
Yeah, can you go up, just make it go up just a little bit to the paragraph, the beginning of the conclusion paragraph? Yeah. So after that strikeout of that long line evaluates how the minor permit. So you're saying this report identifies how the Act 250 permitting process can better support WPM and their role in the forest economy. I think it's identifies changes, right? Alterations or things. I mean, it's not about how the permitting process can support, it's how we can alter it. So. And we can come up with a better word. I mean, if, you know, but that's what I think we want to say there. And then where is it where you talk about beyond the board's reach or something? Okay, that's in the next paragraph, first sentence at the end. I think that if we say the permit processes, these other permit processes are beyond the jurisdiction of the board is probably more appropriate. Take out reach. Then I have the word facilitate. Let me find that. The permit.
It's in the middle of that. Changes to Act 250
Oh,
rules
yeah.
to facilitate permitting of.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like
Yeah.
plan changes to Act 250 rules to improve. I mean, facilitate.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's getting to that same notion of trying to improve. You know, and that may not be the right word.
Yeah, I don't know if improves the right word either,
Right,
but
maybe better facilitate, you know.
To support.
support. Yeah. Yeah. How about support?
That's all I had.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anything else on wood products from anybody in attendance?
So, we don't have a board meeting Monday. We may yet get further comments. I was still, as I've mentioned before, expecting comments from the professional logging contractors of the Northeast. Haven't seen them yet. So if anything comes in, I'll forward it promptly. And I'm envisioning that, you know, maybe after we'll see what happens. But I would like to get another draft sort of as a final draft 4 kind of posted, and maybe we can just agree, I'll accept all these changes. Post this as draft 4. Be looking ahead to next Thursday.
Kirsten, can you save it as is and then create a new draft 4 and then accept
Yeah.
all the changes? Okay.
Yeah, so you have
thanks.
like a copy that's the track
Yeah.
changes copy
Yeah.
and then a clean copy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thanks.
And I mean, there's that one area I'm gonna go back to. But yeah, if we'll just have to see how this gets the finish line looking ahead to next Thursday, depending on what does or doesn't arrive for further comments.
Yep. And the end of day tomorrow is the deadline for public comments.
Right. I mean, I can share that Sam Lincoln had given me kind of a heads up that he envisioned that their comments would ask that the board consider this study in the context of all of like the tier 3, et cetera, Act 181 implications, particularly as they pertain to like, rural businesses and working lands. I'm completely paraphrasing, but that's kind of like the essence of what I'm understanding that the focus is, at least in part, is that
You mean
this should be
in the as yet not submitted?
right.
Okay.
The
Okay.
consideration of how Act 250 deals with wood products manufacturing should be considered in that larger framework.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so if we don't have any public comment, then let's move on to our next agenda item. Discussion and possible action on appeals enforcement and discussion of personnel matters. Anybody want to make a motion? To go into executive session? Brooke?
Well, I kind of flubbed it the last time. Let me see if I can say it better this time because I don't have my script in front of me. I move that the board make a finding that the premature public knowledge of the following matters would put the board at a substantial disadvantage, and move that the board retire or convene an executive session to discuss appeals enforcement and receive attorney-client privileged information. Am I missing anything?
Discussion of personnel matters.
And a personnel matter, all of which premature disclosure would prejudice the board.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is more than 2/3. So we will go into executive session and return here after. Okey doke. We have Sarah's missing. Oh, no, there she is. Okay. We're all here. So we are back from executive session. We have nothing to report out. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
That was unanimous. Thank you. See you all.